On a dark mountain road in Thailand, a terrible bus accident took the lives of almost everyone on board. All except one. But surviving that night was not a miracle. It was the beginning of something far worse. Because after the crash, the survivor began seeing the passengers who died, standing beside his bed every night at 3:17 a.m. And among them was someone who had been waiting for 30 years. Someone who whispered to him before the crash, "Get off the bus." Tonight, we tell the story of the survivor who saw the dead. Chapter 1. The only one who survived. The rain began just after midnight. It was the kind of rain that swallowed the road and blurred the world into shadows and pale streaks of light. The old passenger bus groaned as it climbed the narrow mountain road in Kanchanaburi province, its headlights cutting weakly through the fog drifting down from the forest. Inside the bus were 17 passengers. Some were asleep with their heads leaning against the windows. Others stared silently into the darkness outside. The engine hummed like a tired animal struggling to breathe. Among them sat a young man named Aaron. He had taken the night bus to Bangkok, hoping to arrive by morning. At first, the journey felt normal, just another long road, another quiet night. But something about that road felt wrong. The deeper the bus went into the mountains, the quieter everything became. Even the insects outside seemed to fall silent. Aaron noticed something strange. A cold breeze moved through the aisle. But all the windows were closed. He glanced behind him. For a moment, he thought he saw someone standing near the back of the bus. A tall figure. Completely still. But when the bus passed beneath a streetlight and the cabin brightened, the figure was gone. Aaron rubbed his eyes. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe the darkness was playing tricks on him. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains like distant drums. The road twisted sharply along the edge of a steep ravine. Rainwater rushed down the cliffs, turning the asphalt slick and shining. A woman in the front seat suddenly woke up. She looked around the bus with wide, frightened eyes. Then she whispered something. But no one heard. Minutes later, Aaron felt the strange urge to stand up. His chest felt tight, as if something invisible was pressing against him. And then he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Right behind his ear. "Get off the bus." Aaron froze. The voice was cold. Not loud, but clear. He turned around. No one was there. His heart began to pound harder and harder. For reasons he could not explain, Aaron walked toward the front door of the bus. When the driver stopped briefly near a roadside shrine, Aaron stepped down into the rain to light a cigarette. The bus engine roared again. The door closed, and the vehicle slowly disappeared into the darkness of the mountain road. Aaron had taken only 3 steps away from the roadside when it happened. A terrible sound exploded through the valley. Metal screaming. Glass shattering. Then silence. The bus had gone over the cliff. By the time rescuers arrived at dawn, the wreckage lay twisted at the bottom of the ravine like a broken skeleton. Inside the bus were the bodies of 16 passengers and the driver. None survived. Except one. Aaron. They found him wandering near the roadside shrine, soaked by the rain, staring blankly into the forest. When the paramedics asked what had happened, Aaron slowly lifted his head. His lips trembled. His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't let them back on the bus." The rescuers looked at each other in confusion. Aaron continued, his eyes filled with terror. "They're still there. Standing in the seats. Waiting for the bus to move again." Chapter 2. The passengers who never left. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and rain. Aaron woke slowly, his body heavy and numb. White light from the ceiling burned his eyes. For a moment he did not remember where he was. Then the memories came back. The bus. The mountain road. The sound of metal tearing apart in the darkness. His breathing quickened. A nurse noticed he was awake and rushed over, gently pressing a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You survived the accident." Survived. That word echoed strangely in Aaron's mind. Because when he closed his eyes, he could still see the inside of the bus. The empty seats. The dark aisle. The feeling that someone was watching him from behind. That night, the hospital became very quiet. Rain tapped softly against the window. The hallway lights were dimmed. Most patients had fallen asleep. But Aaron couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard something. At first it was faint. A sound like water dripping on the floor. Then came something worse. Footsteps. Slow. Wet. Walking somewhere inside the room. Aaron opened his eyes. The room was dark except for the pale glow of the monitor beside his bed. The footsteps stopped. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. He forced himself to sit up. And that was when he saw her. At the foot of his bed sat a woman. Her back faced him. Long black hair hung down to her waist, dripping water onto the hospital floor. Her clothes were torn and soaked with mud. Aaron felt his throat tighten. He recognized her. She had been sitting near the front of the bus. He remembered her face clearly because she had smiled politely when he boarded. But now, she slowly turned her head. The movement was stiff. Unnatural. When her face came into the light, Aaron nearly screamed. Half of her forehead was crushed. Glass fragments were embedded in her skin. Blood had dried in dark lines across her cheeks. But her eyes were open. Looking directly at him. Her lips moved slowly. Her voice sounded distant, like someone speaking underwater. "You got off the bus?" Aaron couldn't breathe. His hands trembled violently. I saw you," he whispered. The woman tilted her head. A cracking sound echoed from her neck. Then she asked quietly, "Why are you still alive?" The heart monitor beside Aaron's bed began to beep faster. Suddenly the room temperature dropped. The air turned cold. Very cold. Aaron looked around the room. And realized something horrifying. The woman was no longer alone. Standing in the shadows near the wall were more figures. Men. Women. A child. Their bodies were broken. Clothes torn. Faces pale like drowned corpses. All of them were passengers from the bus. All of them were dead. And every single one of them was staring at him. Waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Call at 3:17 a.m. The first night Aaron saw the dead, he believed it was a nightmare. The second night, he knew it was not. Sleep had become something fragile and dangerous. Every time he closed his eyes, the memory of the broken bus returned, twisted metal, shattered glass, and the endless darkness of the ravine. But the worst part was not the accident. The worst part came after midnight. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Aaron's eyes suddenly opened. Every night. Without fail. He did not wake up because of noise. He woke up because of silence. The kind of silence that felt wrong, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. The hospital clock on the wall ticked softly. 3:17. Aaron stared at the ceiling, afraid to move. Because he already knew what would happen next. The air inside the room slowly grew colder. His breath began to form faint mist in the darkness. Then the door creaked open. But no nurse walked in. Instead, something stepped through the doorway. Wet footsteps echoed softly across the floor. 1, 2, 3. Aaron slowly turned his head. The woman from the bus stood beside the window again. Her hair hung over her ruined face. Water dripped steadily from her clothes. But tonight she was not alone. Behind her, more figures entered the room. A man with a broken jaw. An elderly woman whose neck bent at an impossible angle. A teenage boy whose arm hung loosely, twisted backward. Aaron counted them. 1, 2, 5, 10. More kept appearing from the darkness of the hallway. They moved slowly, silently, until they formed a circle around his hospital bed. 16 figures. 16 passengers. All of them had died in the crash. None of them blinked. None of them spoke. They simply stared at him. Aaron felt his body trembling uncontrollably. "Please," he whispered. "I didn't do anything." No one answered. Minutes passed like hours. Then the little boy stepped forward. His face was pale and cracked like porcelain. He looked up at Aaron with empty eyes. Have we arrived yet? The boy asked quietly. Aaron felt tears forming in his eyes. No. The boy looked confused. My mother said we would reach Bangkok in the morning. The other spirits slowly turned their heads toward Aaron, as if waiting for him to confirm something. But Aaron didn't know what to say. Because deep inside his heart, he realized the terrifying truth. These people did not know they were dead. The hospital clock ticked again. 3:18. And suddenly, all 16 spirits vanished. The room became silent once more. But before disappearing, the woman with the broken forehead whispered one last thing. A sentence that froze Aaron's blood. Tomorrow, someone else will come. And somewhere far down the dark hospital hallway, a new set of footsteps began to walk toward his room. Chapter 4. The Monk's Warning. The next morning, Aaron looked like a man who had not slept for years. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes, and his hands trembled whenever he tried to drink water. The nurses believed the trauma of the accident was affecting his mind. But Aaron knew the truth. What he had seen in the night was real. The passengers from the bus had come back, and they had stood around his bed like silent witnesses. Around noon, a visitor arrived. He was an elderly Buddhist monk from a small temple near the hospital. His robe was faded with age, and his face carried deep lines carved by decades of quiet contemplation. The hospital staff had contacted him after hearing about Aaron's strange words following the accident. The monk entered the room slowly. For a long moment, he simply stood near the door, observing Aaron carefully. Then his expression changed. Something in the air made him uneasy. You have seen them, the monk said quietly. Aaron's heart skipped a beat. You know? He asked. The monk nodded. He walked toward the window and closed his eyes as if listening to something invisible in the room. The dead often linger when they leave this world suddenly, he said, especially when they do not understand that they are gone. Aaron swallowed. They come every night, he whispered. All of them. The monk remained silent for several seconds. Then he asked a strange question. Tell me, where were you when the accident happened? Aaron hesitated. I stepped off the bus for a moment. The monk slowly turned toward him. Why? Aaron remembered the whisper in the darkness. Someone told me to get off. The room became very still. The monk's eyes narrowed slightly. Did you see who spoke? No, Aaron said. The monk walked closer to the hospital bed. His voice lowered. That means something chose you. Aaron felt a chill crawl down his spine. Chose me, for what? The monk looked directly into his eyes. For a burden that few people in this world can carry. Outside the window, wind rustled the trees. The monk continued speaking in a calm but serious tone. Sometimes, when a person escapes death at the last moment, the barrier between the living and the dead becomes thin. Aaron's breathing grew heavier. You mean? Yes, the monk said. You survived the accident. But a part of your soul remained with those who died. The monk paused before finishing his sentence. And now, you can see them. Aaron's hands tightened around the hospital blanket. But why are they coming to me? The monk looked toward the empty corner of the room. His expression darkened. Because to them, you are the last person who left the bus. He lowered his voice even further. And the only one who might lead them back.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Secret in the Rain. That afternoon, Aaron could not stop thinking about the monk's words. The barrier between the living and the dead has become thin. The sentence echoed again and again inside his mind. Outside the hospital window, dark clouds gathered over the mountains. Rain slowly began to fall, tapping softly against the glass. The sound reminded Aaron of that night. The night of the accident. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember every detail. At first, the memory was blurry. Just the shaking bus. The heavy rain. The distant thunder rolling across the valley. But then something clearer returned. The whisper. Aaron's eyes opened suddenly. It had been so close. So close that he could feel cold breath touching his ear. Get off the bus. The voice had sounded calm. Not angry. Not threatening. almost like a warning. At the time, Aaron thought it was his imagination. Maybe someone behind him had spoken. But now he realized something horrifying. No one had been sitting behind him. He had checked. Slowly, Aaron sat up in his hospital bed. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Then he heard it again. A faint sound near the window. Tap. 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 At first he thought it was the rain. But the rhythm was wrong. It sounded like someone knocking from outside. Aaron turned his head toward the glass. His heart stopped. A pale hand was pressed against the window. The fingers were long and thin. The skin looked gray, like something that had been underwater for too long. Then a face slowly appeared behind the glass. It was the driver. The bus driver who had died in the crash. His forehead was split open, and dried blood covered one eye. Rain ran down his broken face, mixing with dark stains on his uniform. But the most terrifying part was his expression. He looked confused. Lost. The driver slowly moved his lips. Aaron could not hear anything through the glass. But he understood the words. "Why did you leave?" The driver raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the darkness outside the hospital. Aaron followed the direction of his finger. At first, he saw nothing. Then lightning flashed across the sky. For a single second, the hospital parking lot was illuminated in bright white light. And Aaron saw them. Dozens of figures standing in the rain. Men. Women. Children. All motionless. All staring up at his window. Passengers from the bus. More than he remembered. Much more. The lightning disappeared. Darkness returned. When Aaron looked back at the window, the driver was gone. Only the rain remained. But something else had changed. The whisper returned. This time from inside the room. Soft. Cold. And very close to his ear. You weren't the only one who heard the warning. Chapter 6. They cannot leave. After that night, Aaron no longer tried to convince himself that the spirits were only dreams. They came every night. Always at 3:17 a.m. Always the same cold silence before they appeared. The hospital room had begun to feel less like a place for the living, and more like a waiting room for the dead. That night was colder than the others. Aaron woke suddenly, his breath forming thin white mist in the darkness. The digital clock beside his bed glowed faintly. 3:17. Right on time. He didn't move. He didn't want to see them again. But the door slowly opened anyway. A long creak echoed through the room. Then the footsteps began. Wet. Slow. Dragging slightly across the floor. One by one, the passengers entered. Their movements were stiff, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. The woman with the broken forehead stood beside the bed. The elderly man with the twisted neck leaned against the wall. The boy with the bent arm sat quietly on the chair near the window. But tonight something felt different. Their expressions had changed. They no longer looked confused. They looked restless. Uneasy. The boy spoke first. His voice sounded hollow, like wind passing through an empty tunnel. Why hasn't the bus stopped? Aaron swallowed. His throat felt dry. There is no bus, he whispered. The boy tilted his head slowly. But we're still traveling. The other spirits turned toward Aaron. Their eyes were dark and empty. A woman stepped forward. Her clothes were soaked with dried blood. I remember the road, she said quietly. The mountain road. Her face twisted as if she was trying to recall something terrible. There was a sound. Like the world breaking. Another spirit spoke. I remember falling. Another whispered. I remember screaming. The room suddenly felt smaller. The temperature dropped sharply. Aaron realized something horrifying. They were beginning to remember. The boy looked at his arm. The bone beneath his skin bent at a sickening angle. His voice trembled. Why is my arm like this? No one answered. Then the woman with the broken forehead slowly lifted her hand and touched the deep wound on her skull. Her fingers came away stained with black blood. Her eyes widened. Something happened to us. The other spirits began examining their bodies. Broken legs. Cracked ribs. faces torn by shattered glass. Their confusion slowly turned into fear. Then anger. The woman suddenly looked at Aaron. "You were there." Her voice had changed. It was deeper. Sharper. "You were on the bus." All the spirits turned toward him at once. Their empty eyes locked onto his face. The boy whispered quietly, "You got off." The woman took another step closer. Her movements were no longer slow. They were deliberate. Accusing. "Why did you leave?" The air in the room became painfully cold. Aaron could feel their hatred forming like a storm around him. He shook his head desperately. "I didn't know what would happen." But the spirits were no longer listening. Because now they understood something terrible. They were dead. And he was the only one who had escaped.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The 18th Passenger. For several nights after the spirits realized the truth, they no longer spoke much. They only watched. At 3:17 a.m., they would appear in Aaron's hospital room just as before. 16 silent figures surrounding his bed like shadows carved from the darkness. But now their eyes were different. Before, they had looked lost. Now they looked aware. Aaron could feel their presence even before he opened his eyes each night. The air would grow colder, and a strange pressure would fill the room, as if invisible weight pressed against his chest. They were waiting for something. Or someone. On the 7th night after the accident, something changed. Aaron woke again at 3:17 a.m. The clock glowed faintly beside his bed. He slowly turned his head. The passengers were already there. 16 figures standing around him in silence. But tonight the room felt darker than usual. Darker than it should have been. The shadows near the far corner of the room seemed thicker, deeper, almost alive. Aaron tried to calm his breathing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He began counting the spirits, just like he had done every night. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 16. His heart skipped a beat. Then he counted again. 17. Aaron froze. There had only been 16 passengers who died in the crash. But now, there was one more. The new figure stood in the corner of the room where the shadows gathered most heavily. He was tall. Much taller than the others. His body was wrapped in a long black coat that looked strangely untouched by blood or rain. His face remained hidden beneath darkness, as if the light in the room refused to reach him. Unlike the other spirits, he did not look broken. He did not look confused. He looked calm and patient. Slowly, the other spirits moved aside. Not willingly. Almost like they were being pushed away by something unseen. The tall figure stepped forward. Each step was soundless. When he finally reached the foot of Aaron's bed, the air in the room dropped several degrees colder. Aaron felt a sharp pain behind his eyes. He forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" For a moment, the figure did not answer. Then he slowly raised his head. For the first time, his face became visible. Aaron immediately wished he had never asked. The man's skin was pale like ash. His eyes were completely black. No whites. No reflection. Just endless darkness. When he smiled, it looked wrong. Too slow. Too knowing. "You don't remember me?" the man asked quietly. His voice sounded different from the others. Stronger. Older. As if it had traveled through decades of darkness. Aaron shook his head. The man's smile widened slightly. "I was on this road, long before your bus arrived." The other spirits lowered their heads as he spoke. Almost like frightened children standing before a teacher. The man leaned closer to Aaron. "So tell me," he whispered. "Do you know why you were the only one who survived?" Aaron's heart pounded violently. "No." The man's black eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Because someone needed to take my place." The room fell completely silent. Then the man added one final sentence. Soft. Cold. And filled with terrible certainty. "There must always be a survivor who sees the dead." Chapter 8. The man who called him off the bus. The man in the black coat did not move. Yet his presence filled the entire hospital room like a shadow spreading through water. Aaron felt frozen beneath his gaze. The other spirits had stepped back, forming a wide circle around them. None of them dared to approach the tall figure. Even the woman with the broken forehead lowered her eyes as if afraid to look at him. The man slowly walked around Aaron's bed. His footsteps made no sound. But every step made the room colder. "You want to know why you survived?" the man said quietly. His voice sounded calm, almost gentle. But survival is not always a blessing. Aaron swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" The man stopped beside the window. Rain ran down the glass like thin lines of tears. "For 30 years, he said softly, "this road has been waiting." Aaron stared at him. "What road?" The man smiled faintly. "The mountain road where your bus fell." Lightning flashed across the sky outside. For a brief second, the man's face was illuminated. Aaron saw something strange. The man's neck carried a dark purple mark. A rope mark. Like someone who had once been hanged. The lightning disappeared. Darkness returned. "You were not the first survivor," the man continued. 30 years ago, another bus crashed on the same road." Aaron's heart began to pound again. "How do you know that?" The man slowly turned his head. His black eyes locked onto Aaron's. "Because I was there." The words fell into the room like stones dropping into deep water. "I was the only one who survived that accident," he said. "Just like you." Aaron's breathing grew uneven. "But the dead followed me home." The other spirits stirred slightly. Their pale faces twitched with quiet fear. "At first, they only appeared at night," the man continued. "They asked the same questions your passengers ask." He imitated their hollow voices. "Have we arrived? Where are we? Why does everything hurt?" The man's smile slowly faded. But eventually, they remembered. Aaron felt a terrible chill run through his body. "What happened then?" The man looked toward the ceiling as if remembering something very old. "They became angry." The air inside the room seemed to tighten. "They blamed me for living." Aaron whispered. "Just like they blame me." The man nodded slowly. "Yes." He stepped closer again. "So I made a choice." Aaron felt his stomach tighten. "What choice?" The man leaned down until his face was only inches away. His voice dropped into a whisper colder than winter wind. "I decided to find someone else." "Someone else?" Aaron's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes," the man said calmly. "I waited. For 30 years. Outside the hospital, thunder shook the sky." The man straightened his coat. "And when your bus came down that mountain road?" His black eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "I whispered in your ear." Aaron felt his entire body go numb. "Get off the bus."
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The First Survivor. Aaron could not speak. The man's words echoed inside his mind like thunder trapped in a cave. "I whispered in your ear. Get off the bus." For several seconds, the hospital room remained completely silent. The spirits stood motionless in the shadows. Their pale faces barely visible in the dim light. Aaron slowly shook his head. "No, that's impossible." The man in the black coat only smiled. "Is it?" Aaron's chest rose and fell rapidly. "You're saying you caused the accident?" The man looked almost amused. "No," he replied calmly. "The road caused it." He walked toward the window again, watching the rain slide down the glass. That mountain pass has taken lives for decades. Sharp turns, steep cliffs, careless drivers. Death visits it often. He paused before continuing. "But every once in a while, something different happens." Aaron whispered. "One person survives." The man nodded slowly. "Yes." He turned back toward Aaron. "And that person becomes, like me." The spirits around the room stirred uneasily. Some lowered their heads. Others backed further into the darkness. Aaron noticed something strange. None of them looked directly at the man. As if they were afraid of him. "What do you mean, like you?" Aaron asked. The man stepped closer to the bed. His black eyes seemed deeper than before. "When you survive a death that was meant to take everyone, he said softly. You do not return to the world completely. He tapped a pale finger against his chest. A part of you remains where the dead are. Aaron felt the air grow heavier. That is why you see them, the man continued. Why you hear their whispers. Aaron clenched the bedsheet tightly. So this will never stop? The man's smile was thin and cruel. It stops only when someone takes your place. The words hung in the air like a curse. Aaron's heart pounded violently. You mean another accident? The man nodded. Yes. Another bus. Another road. Another survivor. Lightning flashed outside. For a brief second, the room became bright. And Aaron noticed something horrifying. The rope mark around the man's neck looked fresh. Dark. Deep. You died, Aaron whispered suddenly. The man tilted his head slightly. Yes. You killed yourself. The spirits in the room trembled faintly. Aaron stared at him. Why? The man's smile slowly disappeared. For the first time, something cold entered his voice. Because I thought death would free me. He leaned closer to Aaron. But the dead do not release their witnesses so easily. The hospital lights flickered once. Then again. The man's black eyes gleamed in the darkness. So now you understand. Aaron felt a wave of terror wash over him. The man stepped back into the shadows. I survived first. And now. He pointed slowly at Aaron. It is your turn. Chapter 10. The Cycle of the Dead. After that night, Aaron could no longer pretend that what was happening to him was temporary. The man in the black coat had told the truth. Every night at 3:17 a.m., the dead returned. And each night they stayed longer. The hospital staff began to notice something strange about Aaron's room. The temperature inside was always colder than the rest of the building. Lights flickered without explanation. Medical machines occasionally turned on by themselves. But the nurses blamed faulty wiring. Only Aaron knew the real reason. The dead were gathering. One night, as the clock approached 3:17, Aaron sat upright in his bed, waiting. He was no longer surprised when the door slowly opened by itself. The spirits entered silently. 16 passengers. The same broken bodies. The same hollow eyes. But tonight they were not calm. They moved restlessly through the room like people trapped inside a cage. The woman with the shattered forehead approached first. Her voice trembled with something darker than confusion. We remember everything now. Aaron felt his throat tighten. What do you remember? Her lips twisted slowly. The fall. Another spirit spoke from the corner. The screaming. Another whispered. The moment the bus left the road. The room filled with faint echoes of memory. Broken voices overlapping in the darkness. I couldn't breathe. My legs were trapped. I heard bones breaking. Aaron pressed his hands against his ears. Stop. But they continued. The boy with the twisted arm stepped forward. His eyes looked emptier than before. Why did you leave the bus? The question returned again. More accusing now. The other spirits turned toward Aaron one by one. You heard something. You knew something. You escaped. Their voices grew louder. The air inside the room turned icy. Aaron shook his head desperately. I didn't know. But the woman spoke again. You survived. The words sounded like poison. You left us there. Suddenly the door creaked open once more. But this time, the spirit stepped aside immediately. As if making way for someone important. The man in the black coat entered. The room instantly became silent. He walked slowly toward Aaron's bed, his dark eyes watching everything with quiet interest. Ah, he said softly. They remember. The spirits lowered their heads slightly as he passed. Not out of respect. Out of fear. Aaron looked at him with hatred. You planned all this. The man shrugged calmly. Not the accident. But the survivor. He turned to face the restless spirits. They cannot leave this world without someone to carry their memories. He gestured toward Aaron. That is his role now. The woman hissed angrily. We don't want him. The man smiled faintly. That doesn't matter. He looked back at Aaron. Because the cycle has already begun. Aaron's heart raced. What cycle? The man's voice grew quiet again. The cycle of the road. Every few decades, the mountain takes another bus. And the dead choose another witness. Lightning flashed outside. The man's black eyes gleamed. And when that day comes, he leaned slightly closer. You will understand why I waited 30 years to escape.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. When the dead grow angry. The nights after that became unbearable. At first, the spirits had only watched Aaron. Then they had questioned him. Now, they were beginning to hate him. It started slowly. Small changes. The woman with the broken forehead no longer stood quietly at the end of the bed. She moved closer each night, her ruined eyes fixed on Aaron like a predator watching wounded prey. The boy with the twisted arm stopped asking innocent questions. Now he simply stared. Silent. Waiting. And sometimes Aaron noticed something worse. Their wounds were changing. The cracks in their bodies looked deeper. The blood on their clothes seemed darker. As if the memory of the accident was slowly replaying itself inside them. That night, when the clock turned to 3:17 a.m., the spirits appeared faster than usual. The room temperature dropped so sharply that frost formed on the inside of the window. Aaron woke with a gasp. The dead were already there. But something was wrong. Very wrong. They were standing much closer than before. Not around the room. Around his bed. A tight circle. Their faces looked distorted by rage. The woman spoke first. Her voice was no longer hollow. It was sharp. Accusing. You left us. The words echoed through the room like a knife scraping against bone. Aaron shook his head weakly. I didn't know what would happen. The boy stepped forward. His broken arm dragged across the floor with a sickening sound. But you heard the voice. Aaron's heart pounded. How do you know that? The boy slowly raised his head. Because we heard it too. The room fell silent. Aaron felt the blood drain from his face. You heard it? The spirits nodded slowly. We thought it was the driver speaking. We thought someone was warning us. But we stayed on the bus. The woman leaned closer. Her crushed skull nearly touched Aaron's face. You were the only one who listened. Her eyes burned with terrible hatred. You were the only one who escaped. Suddenly the lights flickered violently. The spirits began speaking all at once. Angry whispers filling the room. Why him? Why not us? He should have stayed. He should have died with us. The air turned freezing. Aaron felt invisible hands pressing against his chest. The woman's voice rose above the others. If one of us must remain trapped. She pointed a broken finger toward Aaron. Then he should take our place. The spirits began moving closer. Slow. Hungry. Aaron could feel their cold breath surrounding him. Their fingers stretched toward his body. And then, the hospital door slammed open. A deep voice echoed through the room. Enough. The spirits froze instantly. The man in the black coat stood in the doorway. His expression calm. His black eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The spirits backed away immediately. Even the furious woman lowered her head. The man walked slowly toward Aaron's bed. You see now, he said quietly. This is what happens when the dead remember. He turned his gaze toward the restless spirits. They need someone to blame. Then he looked back at Aaron. And eventually, his voice dropped into a whisper. They will try to take your life to balance their own. Chapter 12. The night they came together. Aaron knew the nights were getting worse. The spirits were no longer confused passengers lost in the dark. They were becoming something else. Something colder. Something angry. And each night, the hatred in their eyes grew stronger. Even the nurses had begun to notice strange things. The lights in the hallway outside Aaron's room flickered constantly. Sometimes patients in nearby rooms claimed they heard whispers in the middle of the night. But no one stayed long enough to listen. Only Aaron remained. Waiting for 3:17 a.m. That night, he felt it before the clock even reached the time. The air grew heavy. So heavy it felt like invisible hands were pressing down on his chest. Aaron's eyes slowly opened. The clock beside his bed changed from 3:16 to 3:17. And immediately, the room went dark. Not because the lights turned off, but because something inside the room swallowed the light. Aaron looked up. The spirits had come. But not the way they usually did. They did not enter slowly through the door. They were already there. All of them. 16 figures standing around his bed. Their bodies looked worse than before. The wounds from the crash were clearer now. Bones pushed against skin. Blood stained their clothes. Their faces twisted in pain. The woman with the shattered forehead stepped forward. Her voice sounded deeper now. More powerful. We remember everything. Aaron tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy. What do you want from me? The spirits began moving closer. One step. Then another. The boy with the twisted arm spoke quietly. We want what you took. Aaron's voice trembled. I didn't take anything. The woman's eyes burned with fury. You took our place among the living. The spirits began whispering again. But this time their voices were not confused. They were united. We should be alive. Not him. Not the survivor. The room temperature dropped so quickly that the hospital window cracked with a faint sound. Aaron felt their hands reaching toward him. Cold fingers brushing against his arms. His chest. His throat. The woman leaned close enough that he could smell the rot of her broken body. If we cannot return. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then you will stay with us. The spirits began pulling him. Slowly. Not physically. But something deeper. As if they were trying to drag his soul out of his body. Aaron felt darkness closing around his mind. His heartbeat slowed. His vision blurred. And then, a familiar voice echoed through the room. Cold. Calm. Ancient. That is not how the curse works. The spirits instantly stopped. The man in the black coat appeared behind them. He had not entered through the door. He was simply there. Watching. The spirits backed away slightly. Even in their rage, they feared him. The man walked slowly toward Aaron's bed. His black eyes scanned the restless ghosts. You cannot take him. His voice was quiet but powerful. Not yet. The woman hissed angrily. Why? The man smiled faintly. Because he still has a role to play. He turned toward Aaron. The darkness around him seemed to move like living smoke. Soon, he whispered. Very soon. The spirits trembled. Aaron felt terror rise in his chest. What role? The man's smile slowly widened. The road is not finished yet. Outside the hospital, thunder rolled across the mountains. And somewhere far away, another bus had already begun its journey toward the cursed mountain road.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Curse of the Road. The following morning, Aaron demanded to see the monk again. He could not stay in that hospital room any longer. Every night the spirits came closer. Every night their anger grew stronger. And the man in the black coat had said something that terrified him more than anything else. The road is not finished yet. When the monk arrived, Aaron immediately told him everything. About the man. About the whisper. About the curse that seemed to follow every survivor of the mountain road. The old monk listened quietly without interrupting. When Aaron finished, the monk closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I was afraid of this. Aaron leaned forward. You know about the road? The monk nodded slowly. That mountain pass has always been dangerous, he said, but accidents alone cannot explain everything that has happened there. He looked directly at Aaron. Too many survivors. Aaron frowned. What do you mean? In most disasters, the monk explained, either many survive, or none do. But on that road, it is always the same. One bus. Many deaths. One survivor. Aaron felt his stomach tighten. The first one was 30 years ago. The monk nodded. Yes. The man you described. The one with the rope mark around his neck. Aaron whispered. He said he tried to escape by dying. The monk sighed softly. That means he carried the burden for many years. Aaron gripped the edge of the bed. What burden? The monk walked slowly toward the window. Rain clouds covered the mountains in the distance. The dead cannot move on, he said quietly. They are trapped between worlds. Not living. Not fully gone. Aaron felt cold again. And the survivor? The monk turned toward him. The survivor becomes the bridge. The words settled heavily in the room. The dead follow the bridge. The monk continued. They cling to it. They whisper to it. They slowly pull it toward their side. Aaron's breathing became shallow. So that's why they come every night. The monk nodded. And eventually, the bridge collapses. Aaron stared at him. What happens then? The monk's expression darkened. Another accident. Another survivor. The curse moves forward. Aaron felt something inside his chest break. There must be a way to stop it. The monk was quiet again. Then he spoke slowly. There might be. Aaron's eyes widened. How? The monk looked toward the distant mountains. The curse began on that road. He turned back to Aaron. So it must end there. Outside the hospital window, thunder rumbled far away. The monk's voice lowered. If we perform the ritual at the place where the bus fell, we may be able to release the dead. Aaron felt a spark of hope. But the spirits won't let me leave. The monk's eyes narrowed slightly. They might. Because the one who started this curse. He paused. The first survivor. Aaron's heart pounded. The man in the black coat. The monk nodded. He has been waiting 30 years to pass the burden. His voice grew grave. And he will not let it go easily. Chapter 14. The Ritual in the Forest. The night they returned to the mountain road. The rain had stopped. But the air still carried the heavy smell of wet earth and broken leaves. Aaron stood beside the monk at the edge of the forest, staring down into the deep ravine where the bus had fallen days earlier. Even in the darkness, he could see the twisted metal of the wreckage below. It looked like the skeleton of a dead animal lying at the bottom of the mountain. The place felt wrong. The forest around them was silent. No insects. No birds. Only the distant whisper of wind moving through the trees. The monk began preparing the ritual. He placed candles in a wide circle on the ground and lit them one by one. The small flames flickered weakly against the darkness of the forest. Then he scattered ash and sacred powder around the circle. This will create a boundary, the monk said quietly. A place where the living and the dead can meet. Aaron stepped inside the circle. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. What happens now? The monk sat down and began chanting softly in an ancient language. The words sounded slow and heavy, like stones dropping into deep water. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the wind suddenly stopped. The candles flickered violently. And the forest grew cold. Very cold. Aaron knew what that meant. They're coming. One by one, pale figures appeared between the trees. The passengers. The woman with the broken forehead. The boy with the twisted arm. The elderly man with the bent neck. All 16 spirits slowly stepped out of the darkness and surrounded the ritual circle. Their eyes burned with restless emotion. Anger. Confusion. Pain. The monk continued chanting, his voice growing stronger. You are no longer bound to this world. He called out to the spirits. Release your anger. Return to the path beyond life. But the spirits did not move. They only stared at Aaron, as if waiting for something. Then the woman stepped forward. You survived. Her voice echoed strangely through the forest. You should be with us. The other spirits murmured in agreement. Aaron felt their cold presence pressing against the circle of candles. For a moment, he feared the ritual would fail. Then a new voice spoke from behind the trees. Calm. Cold. Familiar. Of course they want him. The forest grew darker as the man in the black coat stepped forward. The spirits immediately parted for him. The monk's chanting slowed. His eyes hardened. So you finally came. The man smiled faintly. Did you really believe you could end the curse? He looked at Aaron. The dead will not release their witness. The monk stood up inside the circle. That is not your choice anymore. The man's smile widened slightly. Oh? The monk raised a small wooden prayer bell and rang it once. The sound echoed through the forest like distant thunder. Suddenly the spirits began to tremble. Their forms flickered like smoke. The man's expression changed for the first time. What are you doing? The monk's voice became firm. I am opening the path for them. The spirits began slowly turning away from Aaron. Their anger faded. Their bodies grew lighter, like shadows dissolving in moonlight. The woman looked at Aaron one last time. Her voice was softer now. Thank you for remembering us. One by one, the spirits vanished into the darkness of the forest. All except one. The man in the black coat. His black eyes burned with cold fury. The monk lowered the bell slowly. The dead are free now. The man looked at Aaron. Then he smiled again. But this time the smile felt different. Almost amused. You think this is over? Lightning flashed across the mountains. The man stepped backward into the darkness of the forest. And before disappearing, he whispered one final sentence. The road always claims another traveler.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The Last Survivor. For the first time since the accident, Aaron slept through the night. No whispers. No footsteps in the darkness. No pale faces standing beside his bed at 3:17 a.m. The spirits were gone. The ritual in the forest had worked. Days passed. Then weeks. Aaron slowly returned to a normal life. The hospital discharged him after his injuries healed, and he moved to a small apartment far from the mountain road. He tried not to think about the accident anymore. Tried not to remember the broken bus, the angry spirits, or the man in the black coat. Sometimes, late at night, he would wake suddenly and listen carefully to the silence around him. But nothing came. No cold wind. No whisper behind his ear. It was over. Or so he believed. One evening, nearly a year after the accident, Aaron sat in a small cafe watching the evening news on the television above the counter. The news reporter spoke calmly, but the image behind her made Aaron's blood freeze. A familiar mountain road. Flashing emergency lights. Rescue workers climbing down a steep ravine. A bus had crashed. The reporter's voice echoed softly through the cafe. Late last night, a passenger bus traveling through the Kanchanaburi mountain pass lost control during heavy rain and plunged into a ravine. Aaron felt his hands trembling. He already knew what the reporter was going to say next. 19 passengers were on board. 18 were found dead. The cafe suddenly felt colder. Aaron slowly looked up at the television. There was only one survivor. The words echoed in his ears. For a moment, the screen showed the wreckage of the bus. Twisted metal. Broken glass. Rain falling over the dark forest. Then the image changed. A hospital corridor. Doctors rushing past the camera. The reporter continued speaking. The survivor regained consciousness earlier this morning. Aaron's heart pounded violently. He leaned closer to the screen. The camera briefly showed the survivor lying in a hospital bed. His face pale. His eyes wide with terror. A microphone moved toward him. The reporter asked gently, "Can you tell us what happened?" The survivor's lips trembled. His voice was weak. Barely a whisper. "They're still on the bus." Aaron's blood ran cold. Because those were the exact same words he had spoken 1 year ago. Then the survivor added something else. Something the reporters did not understand. But Aaron did. "There's a man standing in the aisle." The survivor's eyes widened in fear. "He's wearing a black coat." The television screen flickered briefly. And for a split second, Aaron thought he saw a familiar figure standing in the reflection behind the hospital bed. Watching. Waiting. Smiling. Because the curse of the road had never truly ended. Some roads remember the people who died on them. Some places refuse to forget. And sometimes, the dead need someone to carry their memories. So if you ever travel a lonely mountain road late at night, and you hear a voice whisper behind you, Get off the bus. You might want to listen. Because somewhere in the darkness, the dead may still be waiting for the next survivor.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.